Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Ponytails Podcast. My name is Andres Gamboa, and I am your host. The Ponytails Podcast interviews people who sold books door to door for a company called Southwestern Advantage, and it's been around since 1868. I myself and all our guests have done this program. Sometimes we do it for multiple summers, and it was all during our college years. And naturally, from doing this job, some amazing stories and, more importantly, some amazing people come out of the program. So my job is just to go find them and talk to all of them. Our vision here at the show is to create the largest alumni network that exists for this, because there's estimated about 100,000 people around the world who have done this program, and our job is to go find them, connect them, and help build a community of those folks to just help change the world. So hopefully you guys enjoy the show. Make sure you guys subscribe, like, follow all the things. We're on all the platforms and social media pretty much, except for like TikTok. So come find us, come say hello. If you want to be on the show, give us a holler on any of those platforms. And more importantly, just make sure that you find another book person and share it with them. We'd love all that support. My guest today is Jim Mariani. He sold for 5 summers, and he is currently living in San Diego, California, was part of the education division. He went to school in Loyola in Chicago and in Rome, originally from Peoria, Illinois. His favorite scroll from Og Mandino is number 9, I Will Act Now. Which, I mean, honestly, we haven't had that one in a long time, so I'm glad someone brought that back. That's exciting. He is currently doing living trust services, and he does it to the DIY market. I'm excited to find out what that's more like, because he also turned his business over and is turning his business over to his son, who did not knock on doors. So just curious to see how all of that went, and how being in business with his son, in what he's taught him and passed on from his experience with Southwestern is like. If you guys want to get a hold of him, he is on social media. Just find at 309, the number's 309, and then Jimmy, if you want to go find his socials and connect with him from your time selling books. So when we come back, quick word from some of our friends here at the show. Here's some career opportunities for you guys looking. These are all alumni companies, so if you guys want to learn more about them, click on the links below. It'll be a quick about minute, and then we'll be right back on with our man Jim.
Hey guys, Pedro Vega with Cardinal Senior Benefits. So one of the most important things in sales is being convicted in what you're selling and how you can help people. So being a broker, we talked about that in another ad. You have a lot of tools on your belt. Another thing is something called cash value. When I sit down with someone and they have coverage, I can usually get them a better deal because I'm a broker, but sometimes they have money in their previous policy that if I can get them approved, I can literally get them an extra $1,000, $1,500, $1,800 back in the mail on top of us helping their family with a better value. So it's kind of a win-win-win, and it makes your life a lot easier. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you very much.
Hey, Jim.
Hey, Andres.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for being on here. Was it Cassandra that referred you?
Yeah.
Oh, so awesome. Cassandra's so cool, wasn't she?
Really?
I was having a talk. Who was I talking to about Cassandra? And she's just she's reliable. She's just there for you. It's such a cool thing. She's actually, I don't know if she told you, she's helping us out with the Bizzler trip. It's like an alumni Sizzler reunion we're having.
It's going to go well then.
Yeah, it did last year, so we're excited for her this year. So, but yeah, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to get to talk to you. Let's just dive right on in. One of the first things I like to ask is, what are you up to now? Kind of catch us up. Feel free to go into as much detail as you wish. What have you been up to since you sold books, and kind of how did you end up here in the living trust industry?
Well, I am now a paralegal. For the last 31 and a half years, I've been serving the DIY market for the living trusts, where I go to folks and find out how they want to avoid probate. And California allows you, under a license called the LDA license, to help folks if you're not an attorney, but you're dealing with smart people who know they just want to avoid probate and just need someone to assemble the documents and make sure that they're good to avoid probate. That's what I've been doing now with over 10,000 families in the last 31 and a half years. And I've had about 2,500 of those families come back to me and have them transfer mom and dad's house and all their other assets over to the kids without probate court. So that's what I've been doing since February 14th of 92.
Wow, that's wild. So okay, I love episodes that have to do with uh with this kind of topic because these are things that people don't know and these are things that people should know. And so just getting to pick your brain about some of this stuff. Do you mind if I ask you like some basic questions about what you do?
Great.
Okay, so probate, we're talking about the court as far as like what happens with your estate, right? This is
Exactly right.
okay. And to even like there might be young people listening to this who don't even know what the heck that means because they're too young to even have thought about it, which is part of the problem. Is like we're talking about you die, you own a house, you had money in the bank, you have a car, you have things that you own. What happens to all that stuff? Who gets to keep it? Is it your kids, your spouse, if they're still around, and who gets to decide? And how can you do something now while you're still alive to kind of make that process a lot smoother for your loved ones that you leave behind? Is that am I describing that about
Yeah. And
ballpark?
about half the families in California never ask that question well enough to sidestep Superior Court, which is where the attorneys get involved in unraveling your estate and making sure it goes to the obvious people, which are the kids usually. And that ends up being anywhere between a 3% and a 10% cost of an estate. So all of that happens about half the time nicely and the other half the time not so nicely because people fail to think through how it's going to transfer.
Okay, so let's. Oh, man, I'm so glad that we're talking. I used to be in insurance as well, so this is like a thing you would see because you talk about like death. So I guess let me just go from the basics and say what are the this is ballpark like what are the most common mistakes people make? Why is it because 50% is a super high number, and if that's California, I'm sure the rest of this United States is about the same, if not worse. So what are some of the things that even people living now me myself I'm married what can I
Right.
do to start working and doing this right what are the you said they're not asking questions well enough like what should we be asking and what should we avoid.
Well, they should avoid someone who tells them you've got too little to worry about. You don't really need a trust. All you need is a will. And all a will is a love letter to Superior Court saying, please hire an attorney and get in front of a magistrate and spend 18 months going through 19 steps of court action before you get that house. And so all of that in the form of a will, which you can do for free, and which some lawyers have been taught just to do for free for their clients through a 30-year career, generates all these probates when they get to be 55 years old. And so these attorneys who have put all these wills out of the hands of folks end up having, when they die, the kids calling them and saying, gee, yours is the name on mom and dad's will, and we need help in getting the house. What do we do? And so lots of large checks are written to unravel that 18-month program. And that's what a will does. But when you go by the way of a trust, even if you just got no home, but you got a wife and two little babies, and you've gone out and you've bought $1 million of term insurance for 30 years, God forbid if you and your wife were to die and those kids were 4 or 5 years old, that $1 million goes into probate and then is handed equally to the two kids on their 18th birthday. And
Yeah.
all that just in time to buy a brand new Corvette Stingray. So the point is, when you do a life insurance contract, you've got to remember to put the contingent beneficiary for the trust. So you can have your mom, your dad, you can have your brother, your sister managing that fortune for your two children so that when they're 18, they don't get the darn money, but rather they have to go to Uncle Mark or Aunt Jeannie to get permission on their inheritance, even until they're 30 years old or whenever it's a good age to do it. So that's the world of estate planning.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. So avoid just like the not having it not having it completely solid. Like avoid make sure you do cross the T's and dot the I's. This is essentially what you're saying. Make sure you do your homework
Right.
on that. Now, when you think about the things that like people should be doing right now. So talk to someone like me. I'm a 30-year-old. I own a home, married, no kids yet, but let's just pretend I have kids. You're welcome, mom. Let's just say, what should I be doing right now? Like, what should I be seeking to do right now? What's the next step for me? Uh, at
And
my
are you
age?
married?
Yep, married. Let's just say I have a kid.
Okay. If that's the case, and you were speaking with me, I would just make double sure that you have a nice 10 or 15 or even 20-year level term $1 million life insurance policy from AAA or from any favorite
Sure,
insurance
run of
carrier.
the mill.
We don't
Sure.
sell it, but we just say go on the internet, look for an affordable $1 million policy,
Mm,
make sure that your wife is the primary beneficiary of that, and then make sure your trust is the secondary beneficiary of that policy. Then you're set because you're young. You have no worries now with health or weight or tobacco or whatever problems would diminish your capacity to be insured. You can lock in a 10, 15, 20, even 30-year policy. And then you've got yourself a trust to say, listen, if me and my wife both die and we've left our little Susan behind and she's only 5 years old, then her grandma is going to be the guardian and she'll be the one running the show and taking care of that money so that little Susan can have it covering her for all her needs over her next 25 years.
beautiful. So, and that's the key word right there. I mean, I used to work at Primerica, and they do term life insurance. They're all over San Diego, and that's the first thing is, yeah, term, go term if you're young like that, great. And then the trust part, though, I'd never heard of. That's a brilliant idea. So you put the trust as the second beneficiary. That makes sense. Wife and I died in a car accident, both dead. Kids, that I see. And then the trust is different. To make sure I understood what you said earlier, a will is like a love letter, is what you said. So I guess is a trust more like what people traditionally think of as a will that is legally enforceable? Is that like a
Right,
common
right.
misconception?
A trust is like a will that's legally enforceable, but it doesn't go through superior court. It's strictly a letter to say, to the realtors, to the escrow, to the banks, to the brokerages, to the life insurance. You don't need a letter testamentary from court to know that as the grandma and the guardian of this little grandchild now, I am legally allowed to take control of this money. I don't have to have court looking over my shoulder, and I'm going to be managing these funds for the benefit of my grandchildren for the next coming years. So a trust just removes it from court and allows all the roadblocks, which are the banks and the escrows, to say, we're good. I'm fully authorized now, and I don't need superior court to grab hold of this money and distribute it out to the children appropriately.
Or as the owner of the trust intended.
Right.
That's amazing. Now, okay, so then a couple follow-up questions on this, because this is fascinating. Okay, what if you're allowed to tell me what's the most in your 31 years that you've seen someone lose because they didn't do this right?
Well, I mean, it's people who had every intention of doing their trust, but then they went into a refi and the lender made them take it out of the darn trust and put it back into husband and wife joint tenancy. And then mom and dad died together in an accident. And of course, the home went into probate. And so that kind of thing is the
Oh,
worst thing that you see, is where it goes into an 18-month thing. Some attorney gets as much as 10% by the time you're done with all the expenses on out here in California, $1 million, $2 million homes. And then eventually that money is then freed up for the child to be vested in them when they're 18 and not at a better age that's more appropriate. So worst case scenarios are that you just die, it's a mess, the kids are delayed from getting it, and all the loved ones and the rest of the family end up paying the bills to keep everything afloat for a year and a half before they get their mitts on that money.
you, you're telling me 50% of people in California don't know that?
They know it, but they think that it's going to be an okay time to do it when I get old.
But then people die of car accidents,
Right.
get cancer. They don't think about this. Oh. Okay. So on that note, on the opposite of that same note is, what is the best like what are the coolest examples of, wow, this person did this right and look how awesome this became?
Well, we've had 2,500 chances to hear the daughters and the sons call us and say, yeah, way back long ago, you did um, that trust for mom and dad. And I'll tell you, that binder that you put together is all that we needed for the insurance and for the brokerage and for the bank and the credit union and the house. And there's six of us, and we all have it set up where you set it up where uh, two of the six wanted to buy the darn house, and four of the six just wanted the cash. So the trust has set it up to be able to allow those two to buy out the other four without getting reassessed on their property taxes and
Oh,
enjoy both Prop 13 and Prop 19, which now says not only do you get to keep your taxes the same if you get it from mom and dad, but if you live in it and it's your primary res, then you don't get reassessed. So that's the new twist with Prop 19, and that's what the beauty of what a proper
wow.
trust setup will do.
Wow. Do you know off the top, and if you don't, that's okay, but do you know off the top of your head what state has the best like trust laws, I guess, if you will, to like if I wanted to say I need to retire here, just think, or you know what I'm saying?
Well, California's got a wonderful setup for the California Trust, and it's the states that have the best probate laws. That's super cool with probate. California is horrible with probate court, but states like New York and Texas are wonderful. Even Louisiana are wonderful when it comes to probate. In other words, they're not in it for 18 months and 10%.
Mm,
They're in it for 6 weeks and $600. So you really don't need trust that much in those states.
that's cool, but I mean, it's still probably worth having just because there's still probably disputes between family members. Like you get those families where it's like, Dad left me everything. No, he left me everything, and then there's no trust that says, actually, I left neither of you. It's your my other half brother, your other half brother. Like it's the whole thing, ha ha ha, or whatever.
And Andres, you're bringing up a great, interesting point because we do a video with each of these trusts where we turn the camera on. We have mom and dad look into the camera and say, Susie and John, listen, we're setting this up. You guys are
Wow.
only just 14 right now, and we're putting your grandmother in charge. And don't you make her regret saying yes to being in charge. In other words, if when you're 16 and you're demanding a convertible Mustang, they're going to say no to you. You need to understand that if you contest that, you will be out of your inheritance. So we build these videos together where they're crying, they're saying goodbye to their kids, and that's part of the trust
Wow.
package.
Wow. Okay, so that begs the natural question. We'll get back to the trust stuff in just a second, but as a tangent question, really quick, I'm assuming your experience with selling books had to have been and is still serving you extremely well because you're basically leading people to the next emotional step. Can you talk about what aspects of that experience you use to this day?
Man, to go out to Tuscumbia, Alabama in 1972, the home of Helen Keller, and to pick up a sample case there and start knocking on doors for 13 and a half hours a day under the guidance of Steve Babbitt and Jim Calder was the most amazing thing because they showed me how to get the job done in 20 minutes and to go for 7 or 8 or 9 no's every third of the day so you can get that 1 or 2 yeses. So they really just built into me that a no would just bring you closer to a yes. And when it's going to happen in 20 minutes and not 2 hours. So this is the stuff of what we do with the Living Trust. We can tell whether a person is either a green banana or a yellow one within a couple minutes of a conversation.
That's awesome. That is so cool. Okay, we'll come back to your Southwestern experience in a moment because that all of that was super interesting. But I'll put a pin on that and go back to this trust stuff. So, okay, so now we're getting those are some of the basics, right? Get your trust so that way the inheritance, not only just to avoid probate, but to make sure the inheritance gets distributed the way you want it to be distributed and not the way that your kids' lawyers decide to, or your, spouse's in laws or some weird person that claims that money or that inheritance. And even if you think you don't have a lot, you still haven't, there's still worth to what you've built because it's your life's worth. And so it's still worth doing it. So let's get to some of the more advanced questions. So maybe questions that um, people wouldn't think to ask. So let me just start with that one. What is the most common question that people don't ask you that they probably should, or like what they should lead with when they first meet you?
Well, like they never ask me about the next generation going to the children. And so they never ask me what happens when it goes to my daughter, Suzanne, and then Suzanne dies. What's going to happen with that money that I've bequested to my daughter? Is it going to go to her husband? Is it going to go to her kids? And this next generation thinking is what is usually the loss. So we build an ecosystem to say, no, it's not just going to go to Suzanne, but to Suzanne's trust. And it's not going to commingle with her wonderful husband and father of your grandchildren. It's going to go strictly to your daughter Suzanne's trust. And then at her demise, if she wants to give it all to her husband, then great. But if rather not, then it's going to flow to her children with the daddy as the trustee, so that there can't ever be a thing where Suzanne inherits $1 million and a year later the husband decides he's not interested in marriage anymore and wants to claim half of Suzanne's inheritance because she unwittingly commingled it into community property.
Whoa, drama. Okay, so um, let's hold on. You say that like you've seen this happen
Yeah.
quite a bit.
And, and I'm embarrassed because I didn't know to ask the question in 92 when I was 40 years old and just getting started in this business after 10, 11 years in the brokerage business at Merrill Lynch. I moved from that into this and I didn't know the questions to ask. And I got some pretty rough phone calls from the daughters saying, we're not blaming you, Jim, but I got divorced last year and half of what I inherited got claimed by my
It's
husband.
brutal. Holy moly. Oh no. I shouldn't laugh, but it's funny, you know? It, I mean, it's just so intense. Okay, hold on. So you so that's the first thing that people should ask you. What other questions are people not asking you? They're like,
Uh,
you
should I tell should I tell my kids that they're going to be getting everything, or how do I do the business? Should I leave it to the hard workers there at the business and give them equity in it, or have it go to the kids? And so I just love unraveling businesses for the business owners and bless those darn workers who have slaved away for 22 years, making little ceramic things for teeth, and saying you should be giving your business to these workers, not to your children, and let the workers keep 60% of it, and then 40% of the profits will go to those kids, but 60 to the workers. So I always giving equity to those employees. So that's a big thing
interesting. Why do you think that's better than just to the kids?
because the kids don't know how to run the business.
I agree. I agree with you, but yeah, I just think it's an interesting. I mean, because people want to go, oh, I built it from the ground up. It belongs to my family. It's like, yeah, but they're gonna run it to the ground in
Right,
2 years
right.
after you.
Is
It'll
that
say
long?
you died in 2023 and your business died in 2025. That's
Right.
and it'll be bad. Dang, that's so true. Or at the very least, like the it makes sense because those people did earn it and they help you build that business and you're done. So be a little generous. It's okay.
Right.
That's so true. What are the let's look at the business standpoints. What are some of the more interesting scenarios that you've seen when people are like trying to divide a business or what to do with the business? Uh,
Well,
in
the
your experience.
business, is either going to get shut down because they didn't think, to put it into the hands of the worker bees, or if it keeps on going, they didn't give those equity workers enough juice to keep their beak wet. So we always love to see a 60-40 split, 60% going to the worker bees,
Mm,
the employees who will then be vested with equity, and then 40% to the kids so the kids can enjoy something of the business because it's still going. So we just love all kinds of ways for people out here in California. Most businesses are going at 2x of revenue. So if you have a revenue of 250,000 a year, the value of the business should be selling for about 500,000 bucks.
Mm.
And so we always think of 6 or 7 competitors, put all their names and phone numbers down inside the book and say, you need, if daddy dies, and you as the wife have this business, you need to call these 6 or 7 competitors and say, we got a Rolodex of 550 regular clients. And, we're getting bids like 400, 500,000. Are you interested? So we help that surviving spouse who has nothing to do with the darn business to market the business over to the competition.
Interesting. So let's use me as an example for this, so make sure I'm getting you right. So we're a business, right? We're Ponytails Podcast LLC. We have ads, we have sponsors. Okay. Let's say it keeps going. I grow the revenue of the business to 100,000, so it's now worth 200,000 in California in this particular
Right.
scenario. Let's just say it's the same in Oregon because whatever. So 200,000. I die. My wife's like, I don't know anything about podcasting. I don't. I mean, I didn't even sell books. I can't host this. And it should. And my husband would always want it to go towards value towards the alumni, which it is true. So she goes and calls Southwestern or some other person who isn't Southwestern, and she goes, "Hey, the business is worth $200,000. That's what it's producing in revenue." Uh, and then my trust then makes it so that she can make that transition smoothly on the behalf, or because I wanted it to be so, and it's hands clean. Is that about right?
Yeah. We always love to see a business owner throw in 250,000, $500,000 of term insurance for at least 10 years so that there is a share buyback, like a key man policy, where
Yeah.
all the people surrounding you, Andres, they know what you're doing and they know of some possible other people who could step into the AG shoes. And if you have a nice $500,000 death benefit, you can go ahead and make sure that that money is going to go to your wife, and she is able to go ahead and sell the darn shares or turn over all the interest of the LLC membership to the new proper business owners.
Interesting. So she'd make money from me dying because of I'm a key person in the key man policies are amazing.
Right.
So I get that. So she gets that, and on top of that, she gets whatever the business is sold for if she sells it.
Right.
Wow, look at that! I'm writing. Everybody, people should be writing this down right here. So okay, um, anything else that as we're getting into the more advanced stuff, like anything else that we should know that I
Yes,
haven't asked
one of the
about?
reasons why people don't do this is they're embarrassed. They're embarrassed because they would then have to make a decision about who the guardians of their children are going to be. And if mom heard that it was the other mom, the other grandma, who was named as the guardian,
Mm,
it would be World War III in the house. So they don't even do anything. And that's why my favorite saying, I will act now, is about at least deciding for the benefit of those kids. You got to name somebody. And it's generally one of the grandmas. And we think it's cool, frankly, not to tell. We just say, keep it a secret. Let it just between you and your husband. And then, if the worst were to happen, then that particular grandma would be the guardian of the kids as number one, and maybe the other grandma number two. And they can work out a split arrangement. But the point is, you're not compelled by law to tell them ahead of time and ruin every following Thanksgiving.
yeah. Well, on top of that too, it's gonna be World War III if you don't do it anyway. Because
Right,
if you die and then that goes
right,
out and now it's in probate and it's
right,
grandma one versus grandma two in
right,
court, that
right,
in front of the kids, that's the
right.
worst case scenario.
That's it.
So you might as well just deal with it now and avoid that. And then wow. Okay, serious question. Well, no, silly question that I am serious about because I need to know this for myself, but this could lead to a more interesting question after that. If I can I put in my trust things like that don't have to do with my estate. So for example, my brother and I have this bet where the first one that dies has to show up to the other's funeral, the winner or loser, however you want to look at it. The one who sell out, we have to show up to the funeral in like a cheerleader outfit or a Grim Reaper outfit or something like that. Can I
Yeah.
put that into the trust where it's like you can't I will have a security guard at my. I want a security guard at my funeral, and I want them to not let that man in unless he's wearing a Grim Reaper outfit. Can I
Yeah,
put
of
that?
course you can.
Yeah,
All
and it's
that.
enforceable.
Oh, we love that, and we love always the cats and the dogs and the birds, their
Sure.
names, their birthdays, who they go to. We love caring for the baseball card collections, the guns, the toys, the pianos, the
Yeah.
guitars, the collections, the music. I mean, everything goes in there.
Okay, which is my. This is what I was hoping we were going to get there. So, what is the most interesting thing that someone has put, whether it's an object or a situation that you see, or not the most, but like some of the ones that you recall that you're like, wow, that was a very
Yeah,
interesting
a
scenario.
130-pound tortoise we're putting into a trust this week. And and that tortoise is going to live another 60 years.
So you have to make a trust
So
for like the next 5 generations.
yeah, yeah, we,
Oh
we we
my,
love caring for those pets and making sure that that's taken care of. And
that's so cool. Okay, so that's one. Anything else that you've seen that you're like, wow, I cannot believe that this got left, or like they put this in the trust. But cool.
we had the Playboy collection discovered 2 years ago. He thought that it'd be worth 40,000, ended up selling for $100,000. A pristine collection from beginning to end, every Playboy magazine, and it was sold for like 110,000 to somebody, and they were insisting on probate for it, but because it was in a trust, there was no probate needed, and so the widow was able to sell it, or the children were.
That is outrageous. Your job, man. That's is that another similarity to the book field where it's like just the book field and your job. You have to get into the intimate details of people's lives. In our case, it was we went into their homes when they were not expecting us. In your case, it's you're finding out what people's like most important things in their life are because that means that somebody went in to a lawyer and said, "Hey, I have a stack of every single edition of every Playboy that's come out in pristine condition. It's gonna be worth something someday. I need this to go in my trust." Like that was another lawyer's like
Yeah.
unbelievable. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That is so funny. Okay, last any other ones that we definitely need to make this taping of this episode, or is that so as far as
Yeah, just the amazing, Camaros and all the GTOs that are out there and
wow,
wherever they are. I mean, those really are getting more valuable all the time. So we never
incredible.
forget, those cars.
What's the most like valuable thing? Like the Playboy magazine, that's pretty impressive. Is there anything else that has shocked you how much value they have at
Yeah, I
like
was amazed at a wine collection going for $400,000. I mean,
no.
I'm just blown away by how people collect wine.
Wow.
It's a
What
big.
is what's the strangest collectible item that you think you've seen?
Oh boy. I guess when it comes to um collectibles, it would be dolls, porcelain dolls, kind of creepy, but we've been
It
in
is creepy.
homes where, I mean, those dolls came alive to these people, and they would have, interactive relationships with these 19 or 20 dolls around the room. So little scary moments.
Jim, can I tell you something? This is not what I thought this episode was gonna go. I mean, I saw trust, and I was like, okay, we're probably just gonna have more conversation about estate planning, which technically we are, but this is not what I thought was gonna be said, and this is hilarious.
And well, what's cool, what you're bringing up, Andres? None of this would happen if I didn't have my practice built on going to the client's home to do their trust. Because
Yeah,
as a Southwestern bookman, I mean, that's where I was most comfortable, and where the rest of the attorney community would never think of driving to a little town and going to a little house and going past the driveway and going through the front door. I mean, they'd be far too above all of that pedestrian life. We made our living because farmers, State Farm, and Allstate agents heard that we as paralegals, for a reasonable price, were willing to go to their little old ladies' homes and get it all done. And it's only there at the kitchen table do real things happen.
That is hilarious. And on that note, let me ask this question because I was curious. You said you mentioned your son before we recorded. We were talking about your son, and he's in the business. So can you talk a little bit more about what it's like to try to essentially have a trust for handing over your business and kind of like moving it forward? You're mentioning that.
Well, the capacity to take a bunch of no's in this business and to work really hard from morning to sundown. I mean, that's something that if you're 19 years old and you're being told to do that and you got to do that for 13 weeks in the summer, you're going to learn some really great habits. And boy, oh boy, my son is now, he was born in 90. And so to learn about that kind of discipline where no matter how hungry you are, no matter how tired you are, you push yourself to the end to reach that third of a day's goal. That's something that if you haven't learned selling books door to door or some other thing when you're 18, 19, or 20, it's real hard to learn, after that. So I got to say that it's really something to
That is
now
so
be
fun.
trying to teach my son those things.
That's so fun. And do you tell him your stories of your time selling books? Do you like what does he think of you, like
Oh,
over
he just
doing it?
shakes his head and just doesn't quite get it the way a bookman would get it.
We just built it, and even other door to door people don't quite get it the same way. Like I've met other door to door people, and it's like it's kind of like the difference between English to Portuguese. Like you can still catch it, you can still
Right.
understand, but it's not the same thing as
No.
someone else that just totally speaks
Yeah.
Spanish.
Unless Spencer Hayes and Jerry Heffel and Ellen Clements and Fred Prevost and all those kinds of personalities were involved in the teaching of you and guiding you, the Jim Calders, the Steve Babbitts, the Dave Causers, the Dan Moores. These are essential people who are just brilliant motivators and they care for you and they're smarter than you and they work harder than you. And so you got to respect them. They're all, black belts in the world of motivation.
Absolutely. Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. So wonderful. Um, last couple questions about this is so fun, and thank you for sharing all this. By the way, I really appreciate your insight here. To get a little bit maybe even deeper and more advanced in the world that you live in, um, what has been the biggest change maybe politically or over the course of the last 3 decades that you've been in this industry that you've noticed from a legal standpoint has been the hardest shift that people wouldn't like understand or be surprised by, or has it been stayed pretty constant over the last 30 years?
Well, no, I mean, there used to be 9-0 Supreme Court rulings back 30 years ago. That's never going to happen again. And so the partisanship has just risen up in the last 30 years like I never knew it before. And there's no more 9-0s. And I think it's a sign of health when there's an issue that is right, and 9 people stand up and say, "This is the way that we should vote, no matter whether we're red or
Mm.
blue."
And then do you notice that like come into play when it comes to how people set up their trust and how people approach? Because when it comes, people like to confuse legal stuff with the politics stuff, and it's not always the same. There's some overlap, sure, but that's the case in anything. But like, do you notice that the way that the laws and things have changed, or the way technology has brought up the world? Like, for example, if I own an Instagram account and it makes me a certain amount of cash, and then I want to put that in a trust, that's something that 20 years ago that sentence would make zero sense to anybody living or dead.
Right.
Now, so like, have you noticed like having to adapt to a changing world, whether it's politically, technologically, culturally, that's kind of changed your job over the last few years?
I couldn't be doing my job without Windows. And it was in 92 when I first got familiar with a DOS program. And ever since then, but without DOS and without Windows and without Microsoft Word, I would not be in this business. But it's leveled the playing field where dummies like me, who are simply legal document assistants and paralegals, not the elegant attorneys that are out there who have studied and worked hard and are really smart. I simply know how to write and I know how to spell and I know what paragraphs look like. And so I'm able to hear from a DIY market where a client says, "This is what I want." I can put it into words. And thanks God to cut and paste and to Word and Microsoft. I'm able now to be in a level playing field. And now with AI, it's even
Yeah,
more so, where almost anybody can do their own powers of attorney and their own trusts.
that's super interesting. So how do you think that that'll affect a business like yours, where it's like, you know,
Well, it always will need a human being strumming their strings, because pushing yourself into the pool of decision is hard. But when you have a little nudge in life guiding you and removing the friction, you're always going to need a human being to add to the
mm,
technology and to say, yes, you lent Annette $100,000 9 years ago, and all the other three kids know that Annette got that 100,000. So let's unpack that now, and in the distribution, let's reduce Annette's share by that 100,000. I always smell it out, the Annettes with the 100,000, and I unravel what otherwise would be a real problem for the other siblings who know that Annette did get that 100,000, never paid a nickel back on it. So I'm able to sniff that out, and AI is not able to do smell yet.
essentially, here's what you're saying. I think here's what you're saying. AI can write the best sales talk of all time, but somebody's got to knock on the door. Somebody's got to
Right,
sit down with the mom and dad and the kid, tell them how and why they're going to use this product and why it makes sense, understand their emotional need, get them to genuinely trust you, not like for the trick of the sale, but to genuinely build a connection of trust so that now you're an advisor instead of a salesperson. And
right.
AI cannot and will not ever be able to do that because you're in the sales, you're still in sales, right?
It's pure sales.
It's sales. And to be clear, because there might be people listening who didn't sell books, but you know what I mean, and I know
Yeah,
what you mean. But what we mean is the type of sales that we learned, which is it's not about convincing people, it's not about trying to change someone's mind, it's about emotionally connecting with someone to the point where they trust you, and then you entrust your expertise, which is solid, to guide them in their best interest.
right.
And they know that that's what you're doing, and you know that
That's
that's what you're doing, and everybody's on board. That's a
right,
sale. Not like, hey, you should sign here because it's good for you. No,
right.
phenomenal stuff. That is amazing. And like you said, just going into people's houses and meeting them where they are, not just physically but mentally. That's huge. Being comfortable with having a stranger, it's so cool, man. So awesome, Jim. This is really sweet. Last question I wanted to ask you with this is how why did you decide to get you were in Merrill Lynch and you jump into this? Can you get a little bit more detailed on as to how and why you made the decision to like do this? How did you even get started in this?
Yeah, it was from the book business, and then after that, in '77, I started going out and doing some stuff with Pitney Bowes and selling postage meters in Chicago. And then the group of guys that I had sold books with came out to San Diego in '77, '78, '79, and said, "Hey, we're into estate planning. Come out and join us, and you'll be enjoying the world of estate planning." So I did that, and I found it a field at Merrill Lynch filled with a conflict of interest, because mine was a commission-based biz where I knew that I wasn't going to get paid unless I convinced a client to go ahead and sell that 100 shares that had gone up 20, 30, 40%. So
Mm,
I found the conflict after 10 years of doing that too much to do. And so my sister, an attorney, she says, well, California allows you legally as a paralegal to serve the DIY market. And so use your sales skills, not just in that conflicted biz, but into, something that you use your sales force, and you'll be getting them to so appreciate the fact that they did get, motivated to finally get this piece of business done in their life.
amazing. And so you started doing that. Did you figure out how to do the billing and like how does that stuff even work? Like, how do you even pay? Like how do you get? I think maybe that's a better question.
There's a upfront fee, and that covers what we did. I started doing this when it was $309 a trust, and yeah, I would take that portion of it and pay the bills that way back in '92. And
Mm,
now it's about twice that fee for an individual to do their trust, or four times that number if it's a couple. So it's like $1,200 for a couple, 600 for a single person. And yeah, that's how it works. Now, when they die, then the kids say, well, there's six of us and we only got one house and nobody wants to buy anybody out. So we got to sell the house. So thank God my daughter Martina, she's one of the top realtors in the city of San Diego. And so
Boom.
I always recommend Martina to represent the trustee in the sale of the house.
Phenomenal. Oh, that's so cool. Wow. And you guys have been doing that for 31 years, just helping
Yeah,
people out. So
yeah.
cool. Wow. What's the next like 5, 10 years look like for you? Or what's the North Star here?
Just being grandpa and golfing better so I can learn how to make a 6 foot putt.
That's huge.
Hmm.
Honestly, that's a good measurable goal. That's
Hmm.
awesome. Oh man, thanks so much for sharing all this, Jim. Let's jump into some Southwestern stuff, if you don't mind. I just kind of want to hear about how it went for 1972. Uh, I think that ties you for the second furthest back first summer because we had Jim Potts on here. He sold in 1968. I think was his first summer.
Yeah.
And then Dan Moore was right around
He was 74.
74. Yep. Yep. So that's fun. So tell me a little bit about you're at Loyola.
Yeah.
What
I
happened?
was a theater major at Loyola, way too busy doing 2 or 3 shows and classes, and they would leave notes. Steve Babbitt would, time after time at Tau Kappa Epsilon House, and I would hardly ever be there except from midnight until 6 in the morning. And finally, he caught up with me at the Commons over there where we ate at Loyola in Chicago, and I thought about the railroad ties that I had been fixing the summer before. Didn't want to fix any more rail ties in Peoria, Illinois. And my father says, "You're not going to earn anything from this stupid business of commission sales," or even though he was a salesman himself, but he didn't have much hope for me. So that challenge, he threw the gauntlet down. He's a father, of 9 kids. I'm one of them, and he just knew what would get me, and it got me to prove that he was wrong. Unfortunately, I had Jim Calder and Steve Babbitt and those people putting me into the home of Helen Keller there in Tuscumbia, Alabama, and knocking on those doors. And lo and behold, after 30 no's, I ended up with 6 or 7 or 8 yeses, and I kept doing that for 5 summers.
Hold on. Hold on. Let me just back up to a couple of things you said there. One, your dad, a salesman, says you're gonna be terrible at this,
Hmm.
and you said just you watch. Did
Right.
you have a time in the summer where you were like almost maybe considered going home or something, and then you went, no, 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 father, and then
You
decided to
know,
stay?
I tell you what, I got to a Mr. Boston's house in my 7th week, and he just gave me a big hard no, and I got on the phone whimpering to Jim Calder, and Jim turned me around there in, I think, week 7 of my first summer and said, "You need just to understand that even though the cops have asked you not to be, knocking on the doors here, you need to put your back to the sign on the outskirts of town and start going to every single house, and I only had a bike. So I would just ride my bike from house to house, and they were pretty far apart there in Alabama, but it was Jim who got me on the Mr. Boston's house. I'll never forget that. He turned me around after about laughing at me for about 20 minutes, and he took me from tight as a drum to laughing again and feeling healthy, happy, and terrific. And so that was as close as I got. I just needed that one nice phone call from JC.
What would your life have been if you decided not to call him and said, you know what, I'm done?
Yeah, I'm just really in need of the kind of discipline that the Southwestern thing brings to a
Yeah.
person. I've met people who are real smart and real disciplined on their own, and I am neither. So I really appreciate the externals of what it takes to measure yourself day by day, not for activity, but for results.
Wow. That is so cool. Okay, so that's one question I had. Okay, we just kind of have briefly talked about this, but Helen Keller's house, like you lived in her house.
No,
What?
no, this was the home, Tuscumbia was, where the miracle worker was all done. And this is where, yeah, my God, that is it. And so I did not live in that house. I lived in a house nearby that. And this was a Yeah, a beautiful home, a wealthy family. But it was a different home that I was living in. But this was Tuscumbia, Alabama. And boy, oh boy, every Friday night they would put on in the summer The Miracle Worker. And that movie with Bancroft.
Yeah,
And I mean, that really was a good depiction. They recreated it well. I've not seen these pictures before, but wow, is that cool?
the birthplace of Helen Keller. Look at that.
Yeah. And so there I was for the summer and knocking
So,
on those doors. And that's
wow.
right across the river from Muscle Shoals, Alabama. And that was in 72. I was knocking on doors. Summer of 71, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards cut Sticky Fingers in Muscle Shoals at the studios there, the famous Muscle Shoals sound stage. And so I got to hear those stories about what it was like when Jagger and Richards and the whole of Rolling Stones were there the summer before.
I
But it
mean,
was an amazing time in that part of Alabama.
I mean, 1972 was like their. I mean, they're still in their prime, arguably, but that was like when it was the rage.
Yeah,
Back when it
and
was
it's
real.
so cool. I mean, Wild Horses was written and composed and recorded there, and it was just an amazing thing to be that close to it, and then just to be riding across that bike, that bridge every night on the bicycle, and to have Alabamans say when I got off the bridge, "Put your bike in our truck, and we'll drive you home." And this is how Alabamans were in 72. I mean, they would just know that you had a long way to go to get back to Tuscumbia from Muscle Shoals. And so I would have more than one time guys pull over with their truck. I put the bike in their flatbed in the back, and then they drive me back up 6 miles to Tuscumbia.
How awesome. So back when you think back of that first summer, do you recall like your first, maybe like your first store, your first customer, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I do remember the first door, knocking on the door and how scared I was. And Ellen Clements said in sales school, just say, I'm here to do practice. And so my first door, I says, can I please practice? I'm trying to do this job. And this lady says, yeah, I am not interested in any books, but if you want to practice on me, go ahead. So she let me in the door, sit down on the couch, do my sales pitch. And I didn't sell it. She kept her word. She didn't buy. But boy, she was nice enough to let me practice.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, that first store. Is there anything scarier?
Nothing scarier. I mean, absolutely. I have midnight. I have um, nightmares to this day that it's Sunday night and I'm going back out to the book field in the
It's
morning on
you got
Monday.
the bookmares.
Yeah,
You 50
yeah,
years later.
yeah.
That's so crazy. Okay, so how did you decide you wanted to come back and do this again?
Well, I didn't want to, but then my sister Celeste, she wanted to earn some money, the kind of money I just earned. And so I couldn't not come out if she wanted to go out and sell books. So she came out the next summer. And, once you're responsible for a sibling out there and her friends and
Yeah,
some of the other friends you recruited, that's how, they get you is that you become not just self-centered, but other-centered with management. And that's why it's such an elegant business.
yeah. So, sorry, I skipped one question. I want to talk about your sister in just a second because I recruited my brother the next. So his my second summer was his first summer, and I brought him out straight out of high school, which was really fun. Um,
Wow.
but what one thing I forgot to ask is you made so you did well the summer. It sounds like you made some money. What did your dad say when you came home?
Oh, he was so proud of me. He just smoked that cigar at the awards dinner and was just a really proud guy. It was the first time that I really felt like, I really made him proud because I was not the basketball star he was or the track star he was. And, just didn't do a lot of the stuff that he dreamed his first son would do. But boy, oh boy, went out and kicked butt on the book field. He liked that. And he knew that I was going to be okay, even if he wasn't around.
And you were. I mean, that talking about like an experience that can change your life. I think I've had this conversation with a couple people on the show, but Shane Hartig was a buddy of mine that I sold with, and he's the one that I first ever heard say this, which is, you know, if everything goes south, businesses fail, or I get fired, spouse leaves me, or whatever, if I just pick up a book bag and go knock on some doors anywhere in this country, I'm gonna be just fine. And I go, that's so true. Like if you really needed to,
Right.
or even if you didn't sell books, you could
Right.
you could go sell something to somebody,
Exactly. You can go sell something.
which is, I mean, that's amazing. What a skill that we were given,
Yeah.
that we were taught. Incredible. 168-year legacy. Got to, you say what you want. Some people don't have good feelings after they leave Southwestern, and I get that. We've had them on the show, but at the end of the day, nobody's mad about their student manager recruiting them to come sell books. That's the
Mhm.
truth. How did your sister do? Did she beat you? Did you
No,
beat her?
no, she didn't beat me, but I
That's
did
right,
bring out my
Celeste.
fiance a couple years later, and she was the number one girl in the darn company. Just unbelievable. It was early days when they were allowing women to start selling, and in '75, Barbara knocked on doors, and she was, 500 miles away from where I was in the wisdom of management. And she did great in Wichita and was number one in the company for all women, not just first year women. And
Wow.
but we ended up not getting married because on the morning of the wedding, she decided she didn't think it was the right thing to do. So yeah,
Whoa.
it was
Wow.
rough. I
That's
thank God uh, he brought along my wife Carol, and now we have 3 kids and 4 grands, and that was 10 years later, but it was a rough
wow.
one to go through.
Did you have bookman at the wedding? There had to have been other
Well,
people.
yeah, I mean we had everybody there at the wedding, being told by Dave Curry, my best man, saying, "Sorry, there's not going to be a wedding here today, but we are going to have the reception, so go across the street."
Oh man. And then one of your book friends just went up to you and said, "Who's next?" or something like that.
Yeah,
Shake it off.
right.
I'm happy, healthy, terrific, right, Jim? That's brutal.
Yeah,
Wow. No number of summers can prepare you for that. I'm
no,
sorry to hear that. But hey, so many grandkids, so fun. You
right.
you get to tell these stories to them. It's so cool. That's
No
amazing.
one would listen to these stories except a bookman.
This is, I mean, I yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. I'm trying my best. We do have a following of people who did not sell books, who are listeners, regular listeners to the show. Not, I don't know if every episode, but they do tune in to just kind of catch stuff that they're interested in. And I always wonder what they think, because I'll tell you this story. Do you remember a guy named Alan Wood? He would have sold right around your time.
I can't say I do.
Okay, yeah, he would have been. He sold in the '70s. Uh, he lives in Newport, Oregon, or near Newport, Oregon. And the reason I'm telling you about him is because my wife is from Newport, Oregon. So I'm visiting for the first time my wife's parents, my now wife's parents. So this is like we're still dating, and I'm some kid from Nebraska who's going to this little small podunk town, Newport Beach, in Oregon. And I'm meeting her mom and her dad, and they have their family friends over, and it's Alan Wood and his spouse. And I don't know that he sold books. So we start talking, hey, hi, nice to meet you, sir. You know, and I know from my experience how to talk to someone's parents. So just doing the thing. And at one point, Alan stops and says, "Hey, I'm sorry. Have you always been able to connect with people like this? Like, I don't know, how do you, where did you get your communication skills from? Like, have you always had this, or like, did you learn this somewhere?" And I said, "Actually, yeah, I learned, and I did this thing where I sold books door to door with a company called Southwestern, and I learned how to communicate with people." And he goes, "I sold books." And I go, "No way." So, we connect. We have this kind of conversation that we're having right now for a good 20, 30 minutes. Her dad, my now father in law, is just like, "What the heck is happening?" He has no idea the
That's
amount of
great.
connection that we made just on the fact that we sold books. And he
And
just
so
said,
that
"What
was
the?"
your wife's father.
Yeah, my wife's father, and his name is Rob, and Rob's friend Alan Wood, who's the book guy,
Okay,
was just visiting.
I get it.
He just happened to be there that night when I like they were just having the
Crazy.
company over, and I just happened to like bump into him. So at one point, when we kind of like figured out like the whole connection, we start going into the execs doing bookman stuff, and he stops and he goes, "Rob," and he just very seriously looks at me and goes, "Rob, this is a man's man. This man knows commitment. This man knows rejection. This man knows God. This man, like, he just starts going through like what a bookman is. You know, you can't. I couldn't have paid him to say something like
Right.
that. It's just an
That's
endorsement.
great.
So it
That
just,
was wonderful.
but all that to say, Rob was interested. Like now he tells me, goes, it's so weird that you guys did that, and it's interesting to me. So he's like, he'll tune in and listen to some episodes sometimes. If you're listening, Rob, hello. But it's just, I always wonder what it's like for people. Like, did Carol sell books? Your wife sell books?
No, no, none of the kids, my wife didn't sell books. Mm-mm.
What do they? What does she say? Like when you tell her about your experience, like does she?
Yeah, she just figures it's part of my theatrical self, but I think that she understands deeper what it has done for me in terms of my work ethic. She really appreciates the early mornings and the late nights, and the detachment I have to the need for food on a regular basis.
Yeah, I had a friend, a book friend. She's visiting Portland. She was here last night for dinner, and she was talking to my wife. And my wife used like Southwestern terms, so she was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, the HQ or you know PC or whatever," And my book friend, she was impressed. She's like, "Oh, she's got the lingo down." Like I was like, "Yeah, she gets it." It's so super fun. Oh man. Okay, so what happened? How did the rest of your career go? I mean, you said it to say 5 summers. How did you know 5 summers was the right call, or did you want to stay
Oh,
in
I was
Florida?
really burned out after the loss of Barbara in 75, 76. I was just barely making it, in 76
Oh,
emotionally, and tried to recruit 76, 77, and tried to bring a team out in 77, but just by June of 77, I realized I had pretty well been exhausted. So Dave Dean, one of the sales managers, came to me and said, listen, a guy named Bob Davenport from Taylor University in Indiana has a Wandering Wheels program. And on June 26th, they're going to be taking off from Portland, Maine, and biking like they do every summer to Portland, Oregon. So get yourself on a flight, which I did that night, was on a bike, a seat in the Atlantic Ocean in Portland, Maine, and rode myself cross country to Portland, Oregon after 34 days. And so that was my way of separating out from my heartbreak and the whole deal with me being over the book business.
oh my gosh. Wait, your life is bananas, man. Okay. Oh, okay. So first of all, that is a long trek. What was your favorite part of the road trip? I gotta know.
It was Iowa. Iowa was the most
Ah,
amazing state.
okay.
Northern Iowa has these rolling hills of corn, and we were going through it in July,
Yeah.
and it was like unbelievable, spires of tassels, and it was a magic, quiet ride through the hills of northern Iowa, and we just all at the end said, Iowa. Iowa just blew our minds.
Dang it. I was hoping you were gonna say Nebraska. I'm from Nebraska, but we
Yeah, well,
Iowa,
it's probably part of that as we got rolling, but that magic Midwest in the summertime when you're on a bike, I mean, it is something else. And then, of course, the crescendo is Du Bois, Wyoming, and Jackson Hole. I mean,
Right. Yeah. I mean that I obviously from Nebraska. My wife's from here, so when we were still dating, I'd drive out to here sometimes. And man, that's I mean, the Rockies are just in the entrance into Portland. You probably came on through the gorge when you were coming into Portland. That whole
right.
it's insane. It's beautiful up here.
It's insane.
Yeah, it's. I mean, unlike anything. I mean, I'm from Colombia, and we have some beautiful landscapes there too. But I have some stuff I've seen here. I'm like, this is nuts. Some really
Mhm.
pretty parts in this area. That's awesome. So you're like, I'm done. And you get to Portland, Oregon, and then what happened? Like, how did you
And
go into
then it
Merritt
was
Lynch?
just down to the Shakespeare Festival in Ashland. And then after that,
Yeah,
down to California to see some friends who were living out here in 77. And then hitchhiked back to Chicago. And
that's.
yeah.
And then you got into Merritt Lynch. What did you do right after books? Like, what was the next? Was that
And
that
then it
Merritt
was
Lynch?
just in. to selling real estate with my dad, in 77 through 80, and then getting into Pitney Bowes. And then that phone call from Ralph Holowinski and Vaughn Woods saying, come out here to San Diego on June 15th, 1980. And I went out there, with $1 in
Yeah.
my pocket, and those guys paid the flight. And I had just had my VW towed. And that was it. So that was the beginning of my life out here, in estate
Amazing.
planning in June of 80, 43 years ago.
Amazing. Now we've come full circle.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So cool. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions, and this is kind of bring up some and jog some memory of kind of like some of the stories that you might be thinking of or that you might not be thinking of, and then we
Hmm.
can go into some ponytails so you can tell some of your favorite stories, and that'll that'll be it. Is that all right?
Good.
Okay, so here we go. So first off, of your 5 summers, what was your favorite territory, like favorite states and or like town that you sold in?
Gosh, it would have to be Millington and Western Tennessee, Ripley, Tennessee, the home of the greatest tomatoes in the world. That and maybe better, Galveston, Texas. That's the summer of 74. I was in President's Club every week in 74, and it was
Wow.
taking that darn boat and riding it across to Bolivar from Galveston and doing, running 31 students out there and really motivated to do that. So I must really say Galveston, Texas 74 was the most ultimate and best of my summers.
PC every
Yeah,
week is
every
at the
week. Yeah,
time was a big deal. I mean,
yeah,
now people like the units got inflated and people keep breaking records and barriers. But in the 70s, to be hitting PC weekly was you were elite. That's pretty solid. Wow, and you must have been making pretty good bank. So your dad must have been super proud of you. He was like,
yeah,
"You go, Jimmy."
yeah. Making more than he did.
That's wild.
Mhm.
That must have been interesting day when you came home. You had your check in 3 months
Yeah,
was more than your
yeah.
dad's yearly.
My mother said, with your father, it's chicken and feathers, but boy, to have chicken the whole time like this with all this money really makes, bill paying. Because my mother would still write the checks and allow me just to recruit while I was out, you know, running the
Yeah.
business recruiting.
Wow. So cool. Okay. What was your favorite HQ that you lived in when you were like like did you have like an HQ that you had that was it probably also Galveston or
That HQ had some amazing guys in Millington, Tennessee, right near Memphis. And that HQ uh, had some guys that were just amazing, that were motivated and uh, constantly talking about what the real mark of a man, mark of a woman is, when the mast falls down in the boat and you rig up some kind of sail and keep on sailing, when everything goes wrong. And I love the sailing imagery, to keep on sailing, to keep on moving. And that headquarters was filled with guys who just loved when bad stuff would happen, and how you'd laugh at it as the shoelaces break each day.
Oh, gotta love that. I love it. What was your favorite breakfast spot?
The favorite breakfast, golly bum. I guess it would have to be there in Galveston, Texas. They had some amazing breakfast spots, and
Yeah, I bet.
yeah, we would just have cereal most of the time, but there'd be sometimes when you'd catch some pancakes there, right there at Stewart Beach.
Some of those, just what those mom and pop places that you just.
Mm-hmm.
I always just go back to them in small towns. It's just as you're driving through something to whatever, and you see like one of those mom and pop shops. You go, man, this would be a good Buckfield breakfast spot.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that. And then last one is, what was your favorite follow day? Whether someone that you followed or someone was following you, and you just recall that was a good
There
follow
was a
spot.
Harvard guy named George Verghese who I just saw at the reunion back a couple weeks ago in Nashville. About 700 guys got together for that big reunion. It was an
Yeah, I was
amazing
there.
time. Yes. And so
Yeah,
you know it.
yeah.
And I'm sorry I didn't know you then.
No, it's
Uh,
okay. I didn't know you were
but,
there.
but that Friday night and all that fun time in the parking lot, and then
Yeah,
Saturday night at the Omni,
yeah.
just amazing 2 nights, wasn't it?
Yeah, so fun. And like
And
the music was great, just catching up with people. I didn't even know some of the people who were there that I found out were there later, that I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get the people who were on the show who I didn't even know were at the reunion."
yeah,
And later on I found out.
so that
Yeah.
was great, and George, he came over and followed me, and to have a little B student from Loyola, Chicago, with the guy from Harvard following me is really something. So he came up to me at the reunion and gave me another big hug and thanks, and it was really a neat
Yeah.
memory of
And
going around.
for context, back then Harvard was the big school, one of the big schools where like
Yeah.
people like Dan was from there. They had a big
Yes.
group. Jim Calder had a huge group from Harvard. So
Yes.
you're talking. That's like the equivalent of like one of the Estonian people coming to
Right.
follow you because you're crushing it and you're a B. Yeah,
Right.
that's pretty solid. Amazing. All right, so we can move on to some ponytails. So hopefully that jogged some memories for you. But if you have like one or two of your favorite stories that you've carried with you all this time, or the one that you tell people, or maybe some that you remember from talking to some of the book guys that you just saw a couple weeks ago. But or just if you can't think of anything, sometimes what people decide to do instead is just some closing thoughts on what this experience was like for you, what it still means to you, what some of the biggest things that you still carry with you in your life and in your, whether that be business or personal. But take it away,
Well,
whatever you want to share.
me and Christian Miller, we were recruiting students over there in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and the recruiting part during the school years, part of the book business. And never forget, when we were talking with these guys and getting them to imagine what it was like to go ahead and be out there in Galveston and have the breeze blowing through the palm trees. And we asked, what is it you suppose you might inhale when you're out there in a summertime? And some guy just chirped up coconuts. It really got me laughing a lot, and I must say that I've had some great funny times recruiting with people like Christian Miller. But on the book field, it was always Corey Moen. Whenever he and I would work together, he's one of the great kids from University of Illinois, and we had so much laughter going on, especially when we'd be out selling in the field, and you just, your eyes would catch each other and you start laughing, and you can't stop laughing. It's pretty dangerous stuff out there in the book field when you start going nuts laughing. So I've had some funny great times. But the I will act now thing is so important, because when you're trying to figure out what to do, just to do anything, just put one foot in front of the other in life for these last 50 years, when things are down, when things aren't going right, just to do something is better than stewing or doing nothing. So I love that as the key Augmandino mentioned. And by the way, when I was in between summers, one of the publishing houses right there on the north side of Chicago was the home and the office of Augmandino. And for me to
Yeah.
walk into his office and to see his name on the desk and to talk with him and tell him about my summers at Southwestern. Of course, he'd heard it all before, but it was just so great to tell him and
You
thank him personally.
you met Og?
Yeah, I met Og.
Amazing. So we had Dave Blanchard. I'll have to just put you in touch so you can just talk to Dave. Dave Blanchard is now the current CEO of the Og Mandino Leadership Institute, and him and Betty Mandino, his Og's wife. So Og passed. Betty got. They probably must have had a really solid estate or a trust plan,
Yeah,
because she kept the business and kept it going, and then eventually turned into like coaching and motivational coaching and stuff. And then she met Dave, and now Dave is the CEO and majority shareholder of the company, and he was on our show, and we had him on the
cool.
podcast. Yeah, and we're working with him to try to. They're doing like a. Have you seen The Chosen?
Yeah,
Yeah, Angel Studios produces The Chosen, and they've picked up the Augmendino's Greatest Salesman in the World book, and they're going to turn it
great.
into a TV show. And so
Wonderful.
he was on here telling us about that, and he was trying to tap into the alumni community to try to raise money for the project, because to buy ownership, even if it's just a small percentage of ownership in the project as it grows and evolves. And so they're doing that right now, and it's so fun. And we're working on
Wonderful.
maybe starting them a podcast where I get to host and talk about principles and stuff. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that we're working on with them specifically. So it's funny that you mentioned that, because yeah, Dave's a cool connection. So yeah, fun. Um, well, Jim, this has been a pleasure. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for sharing all of this wisdom. Let me just put this last thing is if people are in California and they want to get a hold of you, how what would be the best way for them to reach? Is that your Instagram handle or what, how can they like reach out to you for maybe help?
I love a text to 619-405-3121. Is that okay?
That's fine.
I,
Um,
I love text messages, 619-405-3121. That's a great one. Or email james@home-trust.com. It's a great email. Or 309 Jimmy on Instagram.
that's
And
phenomenal.
our website is home-trust.com on the website. So my son
Amazing.
Marco owns it and runs it. I'm just golfing and being a grandpa these days.
Amazing. And then if they have questions, they can ask you. Then, or you can. Do you have people in other states that you can refer them to that maybe or something like
Yeah,
that, or any or just kind of maybe pointers that you can give out? Is that something that could work?
yeah. And we're always open for a Sunday meeting out here. So if any managers are looking for a Sunday meeting, we're a great site for it.
Amazing. Um. All right. This is awesome. Thank you so much, guys. My name is Andres Gamboa. This has been the Ponytails podcast. We've been on with Jim Mariani. Thank you so much, Jim. I hope you had a blast.
Great. Thank you, AG.
Bye, guys.